Welcome into Rounding the Bases Live, presented by Enterprise Bank and Trust. We are already at Wednesday of this week, moving along, and thanks to all my friends over at Enterprise Bank and Trust, hashtag no stopping you, for their partnership and allowing me to continue to bring these conversations that really have evolved over the last 2.5 or so months of doing this podcast. And, one thing that I've said over and over again is I want to be able to either provide people with my guests some inspiration during tough times. I want to be able to teach or educate them on a topic, whether it be a couple of months back, PPP loans, or whether it be we had an unemployment attorney on, things like that. Or sometimes just providing people, certainly that hope, and also being able to share the stories of businesses here in town and organizations that are having to pivot and how they're going about that. So, bottom line is, I think there's stories to be told every day. Excited that Enterprise Bank and Trust has allowed me to do that. Casey Cattle Company is a phenomenal group of veterans, veteran-owned and operated up in Weston, Missouri. Wagyu beef, just got my order in yesterday. If they're out and you're looking for Wagyu beef and ground beef and steaks and bacon cheeseburger brats and award-winning hot dogs and more, if what you're looking for is out, just keep on checking back because they restock all the time. It is worth the wait. They deliver to all 50 states. You can get updates through their newsletter or on social media. And today is Wednesday, which means if you pop on by JJ's Wine and Spirits, southwest corner of College and Antioch in Overland Park, 15% off all bottles of wine. Because, we love the alliteration of Wine Wednesday. They will help you pick out a bottle for exactly what you are looking for. I will certainly be popping in there later today. Popping into the show this afternoon is a guy that I've had a chance to get to know over the last couple of years, a friend and a man who served his country, our country. Mike Kenny is the executive director of Warriors Ascent, still making an impact with our veterans, and not just veterans too, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But Mike, thanks for joining the podcast, and I know that you always have a great perspective on things. How are you doing?
Joel, I'm great. Thanks so much for having me. What a fantastic opportunity. Greatly appreciate it. No, things are good as can be, given the social isolation and COVID. I think everyone's had to make some adjustments, and be nimble. But hey, what can you do? Case are off the rock.
No doubt about it. We got to roll with it. And I've said so many times, I'll continue to say it over and over again, that to me, members of the military or former members of the military, once in the military, always in the military, I think, have lessons that really translate to everyday life because, and I talk about culture, but you have to get the culture right. And that doesn't mean it's perfect, but you have to get it right because oftentimes, not every day, lives could be on the line. So, a baseball team like the Kansas City Royals, they would argue that they have to get their culture right. It's important to them. It's also, to me, it's a competitive advantage in the market where they are a smaller team. How do they compete with the bigger boys? They get the culture right, and not all do. It's not life and death, although maybe it's life and death in terms of the wins and losses and how many people are interested. By the way, there's a whole other discussion about life and death with baseball right now, and it seems to me like they're choosing the death angle of things. Don't get me started. But it's a long way of me saying that I'm always fascinated by my military guests because the perspective is so different. And I'm wondering right now, and we'll get into Warriors Ascent, I'm wondering right now how your years of service to this country have shaped you to handle a pandemic.
Well, gee, I spent 22 years in the military, Fort West Point, another 22 in the infantry and the special forces. So obviously a formative experience. And, in terms of the pandemic, I'd say you've got to be agile, nimble, adaptable. That's what the military trains you to be. Some of the things I've heard, some of our, military leaders say is it's about winning the adaptation game, to where, all right, hey, this is the operational environment. You've got to survey that, get a sense of what's going on, what your role is in it. And those that really, I'll say, flourish and persevere and succeed are those that can adapt the most readily. And that's both individually and as an organization as well. So that's, I'd say, absolutely critical.
I threw the deep question at you right away, so I apologize for that. But I just think, there's never been a time where we have all, in some form or another, struggled. And, maybe I can change that to say that everybody struggles in some form every day. We may not know about it. Maybe we know about it more right now. I mean, the reality of it is, and certainly we could debate people, you know, re-emerging into society, masks, no mask, all that kind of stuff. Everybody's having those discussions, and I've had them here on this podcast. But we're all dealing with change right now at a much faster pace than what we're used to. We've all experienced disruption before, but we're experiencing it together at the same time. And so, getting back to what you're saying, I mean, from a military standpoint, you had to be trained for that, right? I mean, you had to be trained for potential conflicts that may or may not have happened anywhere around the world. And so I'm wondering if you remember back to those early years in the military and kind of what you learned over time from, I'm sure, a lot of mentors and leaders, and then becoming a leader yourself.
Absolutely. So early on, as a platoon leader, you're given a decent amount of, I'll say, responsibility. 32 individuals, in the infantry, 32 men. You fit into a particular culture. You're given a series of, some are pretty well structured problems and some are relatively unstructured. So the straightforward ones are, conduct this military task, do it to standard, and lead your soldiers to do that, to achieve an objective or a mission that everyone can get behind. And then as we've, I'll speak for myself, as I progressed higher and higher, the problems become more wicked and unstructured, less lockstep. In the military, as one would expect, you've got a variety of problem-solving tools, the military decision-making process. Then in my time at the School of Advanced Military Studies at Fort Leavenworth, where they teach operational level planners. So when you've got general officers and flag officers, admirals and such, I won't say wax strategically and philosophically, but when they say, hey, we're going to do this in said country, there's usually some planning that goes into that, and a guy or gal for that matter has got to develop an operational plan that puts things into motion and actually achieves strategic objectives. So you've got planning constructs with that as well. But really, at SAMS, the things they taught were your three frames. There's the environment frame. Understand what the operating environment is, the players, the relationships, the problem frame. What is the problem that you're dealing with? And a lot of times it's ill structured. It's not very straightforward. It's a system of systems per se. And then lastly, the solution frame. So it sounds very rudimentary, but it's with all things. It's it may be simple in concept, but in execution proves to be far more difficult. But really, in the end, the military is about solving problems. And that's what, as a military officer, we were trained to do, from day one.
Well, and I think about that a lot now, Mike, too, because, here is this first class training, right, across the board in all branches, by the way, as much as I always love poking at different branches of the military when they're around each other, because it's just too much fun.
Yes.
Right? Had a retired brigadier general on the other day, a couple of weeks ago, and a retired rear admiral of the Navy. And, I wanted to learn about leadership, but you darn well knew that I was going to ask them about Army versus Navy, even if that game isn't until next fall. And you know how that goes, right?
Yes.
But you've all been trained by the leaders of this country and the military in similar ways, and it doesn't matter whether you're a Navy SEAL or a Ranger or a pilot or whatever it is, which, by the way, might be the chef in the kitchen. That all been trained for everything that you're talking about. But yet then, and this is my transition into Warriors Ascent, then, these men and women come home, and oftentimes, especially with the conflicts that we have had during your generation of serving, we had a lot of quiet for a long time, but there may not be such a thing anymore. And so, these men and women come home, and some come home whole, some don't, and it's tough, and they've seen things. So Warriors Ascent is one of the many organizations that helps with this, and maybe in a different way, and we'll talk about that certainly in a holistic way. But let's talk about what Warriors Ascent is, and I think you and I got introduced. It's been a number of years ago now at this point, because I remember being involved, and Wade Davis, the former Royals closer, being involved. So it's been a little while since he's been here. That should give people an idea. But I think what struck me about this was just the impact you're able to make, and not just on veterans, but also on first responders. And we don't oftentimes hear those groups being lumped together. But tell me about that and what the goals and missions are of Warriors Ascent.
Absolutely. So Warriors Ascent, we're a 501c3 that helps veterans and first responders with PTS, as you state. And ours is really almost a capacity building model in that we provide our participants the tools they need to heal and tend the mind, body, and soul. So really healing hearts and minds per se. We like to say that we empower our participants to take ownership of their own healing and their own lives. So what I'm super proud of is not only the veteran angle, but first responder angle. So first responders, police, fire, EMS, dare I say, are relatively underserved and in some instances underappreciated segment of our society. And the burdens that they bear in their service to society, to the country, as well as that of, veterans, I think are really underestimated. I think the visible wounds, especially with veterans that people come back with, are easy to see. But the psychological and emotional trauma of veterans and first responders in dealing day in and day out with what it is that they do has a significant and really underappreciated deleterious effect on their emotional well-being and psychological well-being. So whereas Ascent's goal really is in 5 days, 5 days of what right looks like is what we like to say. We give them tools, meditation, mindfulness, cognitive behavioral therapy, nutrition, really a holistic approach per se. Ours is not a pharmacological approach. And in the end, what we're endeavoring to do is provide them, dare I say, lifestyle habits and an outlook and a sense of community that gets them, I'll say, back on track, so that they can gain control of their lives. So, the conversation that you and I were having before about, geez, so much coming at you, what can you control? One of the things that we like to say is, control the controllable. Borrow that from, John McGraw from Vision Pursue, right? So we partner with them a little bit too. He's done, he's come out to help us a few times. But control the controllable, and that really, in the end, is all that you can do.
That, by the way, is a lesson, and I've heard that from John. I use it too in some of my speaking. It applies to all of us. I like to put it in sports terms that, if you're at the plate in baseball and you do things the right way, and you smoke a line shot to the third baseman that certainly looked like a double or a triple down the line, and he dives and catches it, there's not a whole lot you can do about that. So don't beat yourself up over it. But, you have some bad habits, or you do some things. Hunter Dozier, the Royals right fielder, I believe, was the position this year. I haven't thought about it for a little bit since we should have been playing for a few months. But Hunter Dozier had a breakthrough year last year, and I remember him telling me early on he was struggling. He said that he goes back at the end of every game and he puts in his own set of numbers to measure his processes, because sometimes you can't control what happens. So he wants to know whether he is doing his things right. And if that means that he hit a ball really hard and it was an out, he's giving himself a credit for a hit. So it's a way to measure. And that gets to your point about control the controllable, because there is so much in life, whether it's in conflict with the military, whether it is in conflict as a first responder, which, by the way, we saw a lot of police officers, 4 of them to be specific, that did not control the controllable. They made a choice up there. There's a much deeper discussion there, and I'm having those a lot. But there's so much that we can control. And I've got to think that when you remember that, Mike, it gives you some power even in situations where you feel like you're losing everything.
Absolutely. I really think people's sense of agency, their ability to control or have a say or a role in their own lives is again underappreciated. And when people come to us, one of the first things we do with Dr. Leese from KU and KU Med is the cognitive behavioral therapy aspects, wherein he lays out your thoughts control your emotions, control your actions. Now, is there a little bit of back and forth? Do your emotions control your thoughts sometimes? Do they emerge? Yes, certainly. But by and large, if you can control your thoughts, if you're cognizant of that and wary of what it is your thoughts are, whether it be system 1 or system 2 thinking, and that's what Daniel Kahneman, right? Thinking fast and slow. So much of your life is dictated by system 1, automatic thoughts. You don't even think about. System 2 is your more deliberate. Well, a lot of what it is that we do is teach people to really be cognizant of their system 1 thinking, those automatic thoughts that intrude that may or may not be serving, so that's a major piece right there. But bottom line is, yes, being cognizant of that, controlling your thoughts, controlling your actions. And the other thing, people will say is stepping in between stimulus and response. So much of what people do is they react to adverse stimuli, and then boom, they go right into a conditioned response that in some instances maybe will save your life. But in many instances, it's not serving you well. So what we teach is people to be, I'll say, cognizant of that, use some executive function and think about how it is that you're reacting to certain stimuli and assess whether it's serving you or not. Breathe, take that time, meditation and mindfulness, quite frankly, that's what that's about. That's why that's such a powerful modality, and it's got multiple, myriad, benefits. But to your point, if you were to do that one thing, I think people would be much better served.
One of the images that stands in my head, and I was able to go out and visit one of your, cohorts over those 5 days, out in the woods and climbing this tower. What do you call that again?
The leap of faith.
The
Yes.
leap of faith. And I remember thinking there's no way I could do this, but it was like just to watch some of the freedom and the emotion involved in these men and women that may have been holding on to this trauma for perhaps years and even decades. I mean, I remember there were some folks that had served in Vietnam there. Think about a firefighter who perhaps was, in a burning building or witnessed, a teammate or colleague lose his or her life. I mean, there's so much to this here. And it was just very powerful to watch some of that release while understanding that this wasn't like, okay, problem solved,
Right.
all done. It's
Right.
not. I mean, I think that's important to talk about. But what are some of the responses, emotionally, even physically, spiritually, that you see during those 5 days? And what has that done for you as a person?
Well, geez, let me address that, on two levels. There's the, I'll call it empirical data, which is the boring stuff. And then there's the anecdotal where you see people just euphoric or even just come right out and tell you unequivocally, hey, this program saved my life. So data-wise, we've partnered with KU and the Coffin-Logan Center for Addiction Research and Treatment. And their studies, their longitudinal studies have shown that we've got a correlation between what it is that we do at Warriors Ascent and a reduction in PTSD symptoms, suicidal ideation, and even risky drinking, right? So that's important. It's always good to have data. But really, I'd say the more powerful and emotive aspects are when, as you saw at the leap of faith, people are almost transformed. I'm never going to oversell, the program. I'm not a salesy kind of guy. I kind of tell it like it is. I'm pretty blunt. That's the military guy in me, right? Some people don't like it, but hey. No, I have yet to see somebody come through the program on Friday and say, man, this was a waste of my time. Not that anyone's going to say that, but every time people are like, yeah, hey, this really helped me. This gave me some tools. Mm-hmm. On the high end, as I've said, unequivocally, I've got tons of people that have said, I will tell you, were it not for this program, I wouldn't be here. I was mm-hmm. this close to killing myself, again, to be blunt. Others have said, hey, this saved my marriage. You know, my wife and I, or my spouse and I, we were on the outs. And the tools that I was taught here at Warriors Ascent allowed me to kind of regulate myself and really bring things back. But as you said, I never want to oversell and say, ominous, dominus, sprinkle the magic pixie dust. You come here for 5 days, your troubles are over and you're cured. That's not the case. I mean, really, it's a journey. You know, we use the hero's journey rubric, Joseph Campbell, if you're familiar with it, just to kind of frame, rather than a person's plight. It's really just an attempt to say you can either be the victim, play the victim, right, or you can be. You know, some people take exception to the use of hero, and they say, well, people don't see themselves as. Hey, fine, so be it. Protagonist then. But you can either be a victim or you can be the protagonist of the story and say, hey, I'm going to persevere. Now, so, in the end, I take great pride in what we do. I've seen it with my own eyes, the transformation. We've got the data, that shows what are the, most effective aspects of our program. Yeah. And I think we've done a lot in the 4+ years that we've been around.
Had a comment come in actually from tomorrow's guest, so it's always good when the next day's guest is doing their homework, although I would have to say that Kiana Sinks watches very regularly. Stimulus versus response. That's good. Mike, people could save time in life with applying this, and I love that thought there, because again, it doesn't matter what walk of life you're in. We all have moments, we all have stress, we all have things that maybe we regret doing later. It's sort of what I call, in the simplest of terms, before you hit the send button on your tweet or your email. And that's really, on a small scale compared to what you're talking about. But it's sort of that, taking that deep breath. By the way, I have to thank Kiana. She sent me some great material last night to watch, to continue for me to better understand what is going on with racial injustice and Black Lives Matter, and really, really moving stuff. So I'm excited about our conversation tomorrow, because those are conversations I will not stop having. I think one of the important aspects right now to all of this, and you see this in your work, is it's not okay just to check a box and say, okay, we did this. The work doesn't ever stop. And so, certainly, and I think I was talking about this the other day with someone, I can't remember now who, because I'm having so many podcasts and conversations, but the news cycle and the way it works is it will move on to the next thing, right? And so the news cycle will focus on soldiers lost, or veterans, or first responders after a moment, and then they move on to whatever the next thing is. That's the way it is. And so from your standpoint, I'm guessing that this work just doesn't stop, right? I mean, there's not, first off, that 5 days is giving tools to these men and women to then go out there and improve their lives. It is not a fix-all, but it's got to be a mountain to climb to try to get to everyone, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And we make no bones about the fact that it's a journey. So when people come to us on Monday, one of the first things I'll say is, hey, I know you've got some reluctance. I know you can tell by the looks. People are like, all right, who are these guys, or who are these gals, whatever it might be. I said, but if you trust the process, if you, kind of be open-minded and openly embrace what it is that we're teaching you, come Friday, you're going to be better. And that is always, in fact, the case. People are like, hey, you are absolutely right. But we make no bones about the fact that, hey, it's a journey. You're going to have to continue to apply these tools. It's the theory, practice, mastery piece. In that, we're teaching you some of the theoretical with some practical application. So we have them do yoga every morning, meditation in the evening. We, we outsource to, Fit Style. And from what I understand, they're the fellas that outfit the Chiefs and Mahomes and stuff like that. So, hey, we're in good company there. But it's good, nutritious food.
Mm-hmm.
We don't, we don't coddle people. Well, you want ice cream and candy and cake? No, you're not going to get that here. You're going to get good, wholesome food. Reason being, it's not even that we're trying to produce pro ball players, right? It's you've got more neurotransmitters in your gut than you do in your head. People don't realize that. And it's like, hey, if you've got good gut health and you're eating well, it really controls so many facets of what you do. Anyway, not to digress, but there is so many people that can use what it is that we're teaching. I mean, obviously our charter is veterans and first responders, and quite frankly, in terms of, the acuity of symptoms, just by virtue of what it is that they've done, in service to the country, they're at, the high end of the spectrum. But I've had a variety of donors, funders opine that, hey, what is that you teach at Warriors Ascent is widely applicable to a variety of people. Whether it be, I don't want to say stress reduction, because it's not really your choice to reduce the stress. You can somewhat manage it, so stress management or whatever it might be. But, as I was saying, stepping in between stimulus and response and other techniques that we teach, if people were to apply that, I'll say writ large, I think things would be so much better for people. Self-care is the big thing that we preach. Take care of yourself, exercise, eat right, get sleep. Sometimes it sounds like a luxury, but I'll say the quasi-metaphor we use is when the airlines tell you, hey, if the cabin decompresses, put your mask on first, before you put it on your child. You think, oh, how selfish. But if you're incapacitated, you're not doing anyone any favors. And it's the same thing. So we live in a society where I think people are just go, 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 go. And, for those with, children and responsibilities, they forego that self-care because they're like, hey, I've got to serve others. But if you're not taking care of yourself, I mean, within reason, you're not doing anyone any favors, because then you're not showing up as the best version of yourself.
And that right there, self-care, is something that can make all of us better, whatever the situation. So it's a way for me to come full circle here. And everyone has a different situation right now. Some are back to work, some aren't. Some are back in the office, some aren't sure that they want to get back into the office, a little bit scared over that. There's a lot of anxiety, Mike. What we're seeing right now and we're starting to hear about, and it certainly makes sense and it's going to add up, is we're going to deal with an increase of mental health issues, potentially, spikes in suicide. That's certainly what I've read and I've heard about. It makes sense to me. People at times are feeling hopeless. By the way, let's get back to the discussion about the lives and plight of black people and citizens here in this country that have felt hopeless oftentimes for years. So everyone is experiencing some form of pandemic-related stress right now. And I wonder how much you've thought about that, because this is now beyond, and I know where your reach is with veterans and first responders, but I think and I fear that we're going to see a lot of people that haven't been involved in those experiences starting to experience that, and we already have many that do, at a greater level. And so I feel like so much of what you're saying today would apply, that self-care, that breathing, all the different things that you teach. If there was, I know there's no fix-all, but I mean, if there was a piece of advice you would give anybody watching this right now that's just overwhelmed, what would it be? Would it be something simple like, hey, take that deep breath, or how can we go deeper?
I would say absolutely the meditation and mindfulness. So we've partnered with, a gal named Amy Shonoff, Mindfulness in the Heartland, shout out to her. We've run a series of webinars, quite frankly, that we've opened up to pretty much everybody, so we've had to pivot. We can't do the face-to-face. So we ran some online cohorts. So those that signed up for live cohorts that we had to postpone, and we'll do that September, October, November, we wanted to give them a little something. So that was an invite only. But we realized the same thing. We're like, hey, so many people are under pressure, under duress, heightened state of anxiety. why don't we run some webinars that teach self-care? My yoga guru, Kerry Stewart, same thing. So he's run webinars for us, teaching self-care, gratitude, journaling, a variety of techniques. There's a multitude of techniques, and our approach is really to provide, dare I say, a veritable cornucopia of techniques. And granted, it's not just haphazard. These are all things that are evidence-based, so we know they work. Mm-hmm. But quite frankly, my experience anecdotally has been some things resonate with others, with people, and then some things don't. Some people take to the yoga. Some people are like, I'm not doing it. We ask them to do it and go through the motions, but then when they're on their own, they're like, yeah, that's not something I'm going to adopt. Meditation, most people really take to that. They see the efficacy in that straight away. It takes 5 days, and they're like, I feel so much more centered. Some people, the nutrition, I've been told, again, anecdotally, they're like, of all things, oddly, the nutritional advice you gave really set the stage for me. It was foundational. I'm much more active. I've lost weight. I feel better. And while not the cornerstone of our approach, still, a pretty significant thing. But I've had multiple examples of that. So having that holistic approach, I think, is powerful, because you never know the one thing that's going to resonate with people.
Well, I know you're doing great work. You'll continue to. I'm not surprised that you're still able to do that virtually. That's part of the pivot that we're all dealing with right now. And, I think this gets back to certainly military lessons and ones that I've learned from members of the military over the years. You can't stand still here. I mean, if things aren't going your way or you're in the middle of some kind of conflict, you got to keep moving forward. And that, I know, is what you've been able to do. If people want to get a hold of Warriors Ascent, if they are someone dealing with post-traumatic stress, whether it be a veteran, whether it be a first responder, or, Mike, I know just as importantly, if you are watching and know someone that could use help, this is the way to get to them, right? WarriorsAscent.org?
Absolutely. WarriorsAscent.org. For those that want to avail themselves of what it is that we do, they can apply. For people that want to support in some capacity, same thing. I mean, the focal point is the website. Reach out to us. We will get back to you. We try to keep it easy.
Yeah, and it's an issue that will continue to be there as so many serve our country and our community. And so you guys are doing phenomenal work. Continue to do that. I appreciate you lending insight, because also insight, as I mentioned, that'll help so many people that are watching this right now, whether they have been in the military or they're first responders. But we're all, as I mentioned, we're all going through stuff. We always do, and now it's just a little bit different in a way that maybe none of us have experienced in our lifetimes, whatever age we're at. So, Mike, it's great to catch up with you, to see you face to face, sort of, in the world that we live in right now. And thanks for your service, and of course, all that you and everyone at Warriors Ascent are doing. Thanks for spending the time today.
Joel, no, hey, thank you. Thanks so much. It was a pleasure to be here. Appreciate you.
All right, great to visit with Mike Kenny. He is the executive director of Warriors Ascent. And again, you can check them out at warriorsascent.org. It's going to do it for another episode of Rounding the Bases Live. Got another great guest tomorrow. Kiana Sinks is one of the young rising stars here in our community, and she is an activist. She has a phenomenal message. She's going places. We'll put it that way. And I'm not just saying that because she had me on her podcast, and I'm not having her on because she had me on my podcast. I just want to continue these discussions, and I know that she is one that will help me do that. So I'm excited for tomorrow's episode. Again, a reminder to jump out to JJ's Wine and Spirits, southwest corner of College and Antioch in Overland Park. You could look at their Facebook page, but jump on in there today. Tell them I sent you in there. Wine Wednesday, 15% off of bottles of wine. They've got a great selection. Casey Cattle Company social media or their website, veteran-owned and operated, former U.S. Army Ranger Patrick Montgomery leading the way. Wagyu beef delivered to all 50 states. Just try it. You will not regret it. It's unbelievable. And thanks to Enterprise Bank and Trust. Hashtag no stopping you. That is going to do it for another episode. Have a great Wednesday, everyone. Please share this with your networks, and I'll see you back here tomorrow for Rounding the Bases Live, presented by Enterprise Bank and Trust.